Like in many occasions when we speak from a common goal perspective with professional athletes, both male and female, what we hear is that there is a huge appetite and hunger to actually get on, we may call it a purpose journey, because it's not just about like feeling disenfranchised as a player or not allowed to actually have an opinion, but it's also that there hasn't been a consistent education for the players, or a consistent accompanying of the players throughout their growing up in football, that would allow them to actually get to the core of what their purpose is about, to understand what their purpose is, and as a consequence get on a journey to unlock that passion and actually marry your professional football career with, if you want, your purpose career. I think it's not too harsh to say that football has been living in a bubble of where it didn't have to question itself too much, because despite a financial crisis, despite crisis in reputation of some of the football's institutions, etc., it just has continued to grow, mostly two-digit year on year. Maybe now is actually the time for football actually to accept that it can play a leading role, and not just because it's the right thing to do, but it's actually a smart thing to do, and move from more of a charity and giving back perspective on contribution to more of a DNA perspective of contribution and actually being part of the solution. So I think the moment is right. We're heading towards a decade of action, and football is as close as it can to become an enabling force towards achieving actually what we have set ourselves as global goals.
But the one thing which really changed me was when we decided, once our academy was cleared of our young players, to host 50 women and their children who were victim of domestic violence. And the kind of stories I witnessed, the kind of stories that were shared with me, totally changed the way I saw my role, and that was, heartbreaking. And this is where we decided to step up our game and really do much more, not only through our foundation, which existed for quite some time, but also to put impact as the center of really everything we do now. And so that I would say, and again, it's hard to say in a club like Marseille, where tens of thousands of fans expect us to win on the pitch, first and foremost. Well, I see our responsibility outside the pitch as important as our desire and willingness to win on the pitch. Elites, politically speaking, love to be photographed with players, but they don't value them. I don't believe they respect them. I don't believe they really want to, think about some long-term projects with players. And this is kind of the mindset we need to change. And this is kind of the discussion we need to start with players, letting them, the opportunity to imagine, to think about where they believe they should, commit or be engaged. This is, I think, a profound undertaking, a very important undertaking that should be one of the post-COVID world decisions as clubs we should make. And certainly at Olympique de Marseille, we expect to have these discussions, and again, to change our way of thinking about this, and to change the way players think about their social responsibility. I believe, for one, that academies are often look like bunkers, right? You tend to isolate, you tend to overprotect your players because of many different reasons. And so, as part of our curriculum, what we're going to do is we're going to introduce sessions with people from the civil society, as we call it, lawyers, social entrepreneurs, journalists, people from a very different background as the sports background and the football background, to talk about their job, by the way, to talk about their mission in the world, and also the issues that they see that they're faced with in each of their own job or company or associations. And for us, it's going to be a way, and we'll test that. Maybe we will fail, but that's going to be a way to, open the chakras, of these young players, and maybe trigger some kind of willingness to be engaged in another area, very different from football, obviously. So we're going to try to sow these seeds through such encounters and discussion, and of course we're going to try to steer their appetite for impact. Let's face it, Sharon and Jürgen, football doesn't have a good image. Football is the universal sport. Football is, of course, the number one source of entertainment across the world. But let's face it, I don't think we have a great image, and we certainly need to improve it. And that should be very high on our agenda, on our list of priorities, and even more so after the lessons learned from this pandemic, and what as social agents we need to do in our world and in our societies.
I do think that legislation and quotas can play a role, particularly in countries that need to come a little quicker. But I also think that we should be equally talking about how women are driving success in sports. That's happening now. We don't have to say, hey, put us there because we're a woman. Put us there because we're successful. And that's a new part of the conversation that I think we should all be incredibly proud of.
So many brands that are jumping on this opportunity because it's a blank white page. And on one hand, men's football sometimes can be extremely crowded in terms of the sponsors' ability to activate those sponsorship rights and the message that they are giving. But women's football is still representing predominantly all the values that football was initially meant to be, right? And it's more family values, it's more about competition and technical abilities on the pitch. And brands like Barclays, Visa, Nike, I guess Budweiser in the US as well, many of them saw this significant opportunity and are benefiting from the first comers advantage. I think the best recommendation that I can give to brands and also investors is, if I had $1, I would now put it into women's football. Yes, maybe the amounts are much smaller, but the exponential growth that is going to happen in the next 5 to 10 years is definitely not to be missed.
I see now more women wanting to get involved. I think just a few years before, women thought this was something that was just reserved for men. No woman was part of, or almost no woman was part of a governing body. And today that's very different. I can tell you in my country, a few years ago, you didn't see a single woman who was the president of a club, of a first division club. And today we have 4 women in this position. So you see the growth of a number of women getting involved, wanting to get involved, wanting to learn about governance, wanting to from the academia, having a profession that can lead them to a position in a governing body in football.
It's become much more inclusive than what it was 20 years ago, but we still have a lot of work to do. And the recent survey that we have published along with our rebranding about a month and a half ago, once again shows that discrimination still exists. 66% of the women surveyed said that they either experienced or witnessed discrimination. And the more worrying part is only 12% chose to report it. So the gap is still huge. Women don't feel confident, comfortable in their workplaces, they don't feel included, and they don't think it's safe to speak up. So there's definitely much more work to do to build inclusive organizations. But the future is very hopeful. The survey also revealed that more than 75% of the women said that they felt supported by their colleagues and their organization, and that they thought the future was bright.
Athletes are definitely leading the charge. This year has been a strange year, but it's been bubbling under the surface for a number of years. And, what started back in 1968 has always been there, but this year has been an explosion in athlete activism. And let's look at that for a minute. When the year started, and then March happened with COVID, the center took a sharp pivot. And right around the same time, we started to see just this increase in athlete activism, spurred in no small measure by the Black Lives Matter movement, a big, important reckoning in the United States. But it started to go around the world. You weren't just seeing this happen on sports, on sporting fields in the United States. It was happening in Germany. It was happening in the United Kingdom. It was happening elsewhere. So it was different this time. And then you're starting to see, from Marcus Rashford and the Free Meals campaign, he speaks out. All of a sudden, that program is restored. You've seen really, I wouldn't say an exoneration because that doesn't cut it, but an acknowledgement of Colin Kaepernick's sacrifice. Because now in 2020, people realize that what he was doing and saying back then should have been looked at differently. To Lewis Hamilton and what he's doing in Formula One. You saw an entire league, several leagues, walk out and stop play in the United States after another police shooting. So this is unprecedented in terms of athlete voice.
I do think that COVID has intensified the injustices in the world, and it's certainly shown up in the United States. I think it's because a lot of things are on pause that people are able to spend more time reflecting and also listening and watching. And because of that, the injustices and the inequalities that we have, I think, always been aware of have just been intensified. And I think you've seen that through racism and supporting Black Lives Matter. You've seen it in, unfortunately, the access to healthcare with COVID. And all of a sudden, you're starting to see the systemic issues that we have that we need to fight for come to the forefront. And I just, I'm so passionate about the fact that everybody has a role in driving change. And right now, whether you have a huge following on social media or not, you have an opportunity to make an impact to your community. And I think that that's what's been shown through the pandemic.
I don't think any athlete has an obligation to speak up if that's not what they believe, or if that's not their platform, or if they don't know where their voice comes from. I think as an athlete, your obligation is to play your sport or to perform the way you want. And I think as any person, just like a regular person, if you have a platform that you want to use in order for social change because it's something you truly believe in, then I think you should step up and speak. But I don't think just because you're an athlete, you have to step up. I've had a lot of friends in certain situations over the past few months, and they weren't sure how they wanted to use their voice or what they wanted to say. And I don't think that them stepping back and trying to really think about it rather than just jump up and start randomly posting or reposting things on their social media in order to be a part of what was happening, I don't think they have to do that. I think really it's something you should believe in, and it should come from your core rather than just kind of jumping on a bandwagon because everybody's doing it. Right. So for me, I don't think it's an obligation. I think it's better when it's authentic and people step up and use their voice because it's their voice coming from them and it's what they believe to say.
But I started running in 1966 with my brother Hank, and then women were told they can't participate in sport. I started the track team in my high school, and that was before Title IX. And Title IX came into effect, and I didn't reap any of the benefits. But of course, I joined Special Olympics, and that's where my voice came. I was always told to shut up. We don't want to hear from you. And they used the R word, which is retard. We don't use that anymore. We use intellectual disability. And first of all, we're people first. And when I look back at my life and I think about today, this whole thing with COVID, being a person with intellectual disability, we've been isolated all of our lives. I happen to be a Black woman, as you could see. And I've seen the barriers of racial injustice. My great-grandma was killed during the riots, and it still hasn't been brought forth today to solve who done her crime. So when we talk about injustice and racial injustice, and I'm a woman, I was told I can't do this because of being in sport. I remember my days in martial arts. I competed, I traveled, and I competed in martial arts, and we were always told, oh, there's no place for women here. Well, I defied the odds. I made it a place for me to be there, and now they have women's competition all over the place. I have seen it through social media where people with intellectual disability are doing great things, and I think the reason why they're doing those great things is because they have that voice. And like I said, my voice was given to me by God, of course, but I could not use my voice at a certain point in my life. It was Special Olympics, some volunteer who said to me, Loretta, you have a voice, you use it. It was my mother. Loretta, you have a voice, you use it. And she meant for me to use it to stand up for my right, but also stand up for somebody else's right, as you're seeing today with athletes. And yes, it can be a risk, and I'll be the first one to tell you that. It can be a risk, but you know, I make a sacrifice to make a gain to help somebody else if it's worth it.
It's important that we recognize the role that purpose marketing or messaging has to inspire people to take action. So I think there's a really genuine role that purpose marketing can lead. I think that has to go hand in hand, as it does at Nike, with direct investment into communities, and it really being focused on impact and really looking to measure that impact as well.
Kids are incredible. They know what's going on and they know what affects them, and we want them to be supported as they go into adulthood. So the direct investment is incredibly important. But just as important as this advocacy piece, what can we do as the adults that care about these young people to make connections with a Nike, to fund a brand new program to train our young people to become coaches, to be able to earn some money and build some skills in their community? And that's what Coaching for Change has become. It was youth-led. Youth told us what they needed. They needed to be paid. They wanted to learn how to coach. They needed to build those skills. They may not be coaches for the rest of their lives, but this is a very important step for them.
Athletes have such an important role to play, and I always take it back to feeling a little bit privileged in this regard, coming from a footballing family. I have 3 uncles who played professional football. One uncle in particular, Cyril Regis, was one of the first Black players to play for England. He was in that famous West Bromwich Albion team, which really, I think, moved the dial in race relations in the UK back in the late 60s. So, you know, my need to give something back really was informed by what I had seen in front of me, what I had seen ahead of me, and that these people who inspired me were people who were on the end of the phone or at my grandmother's on Sunday dinner. And I realized that I had an important role to play in giving something back to these issues, and also giving something back to the communities in which I came from. It's not lost on me that whilst my uncle became a professional footballer, my uncle Dave Regis became a professional footballer. Then my uncle Otis Roberts on the other side became a professional footballer, and I became a professional footballer. And my answer to that is the proximity to somebody who did it. And I think we've seen in my community that that giving back through the foundation has been vitally important to give people an opportunity, and that belief that if this family have been fortunate enough to do this, that it's there for them as well, not just from an elite perspective, but the benefits of playing sport. So from an athlete perspective, it's being visible, it's being able to interact with your community whilst you might be very far away, and it's also about championing some very important causes.
CSR no longer can be a tick box exercise on an annual report. You know, I've heard so many people say things like, well, you can't just paint a fence and call that giving back. You can't just put your name on a football shirt or a rugby shirt or whatever type of shirt and say that, you know, that is part of your philanthropic giving. Society has moved on from that. We're entering a new moment in time, which is called the stakeholder economy. What that means is that it's no longer just about an economic return that creates value for the business. Actually, it's societal return as well.
You know, many of these athletes are just icons, right? You know, when Messi walks onto the pitch, people aren't just searching for, you know, how he's going to play the game. They care about what he was wearing at the red carpet event last week. They care about what music he's listening to on his headphones, which for me is far more interesting, because that's what I think sports leagues and teams should be thinking about, is how do I engage this much broader fandom, this much broader audience that cares about a lot more than just the stats and specifics of the actual performance itself. And when you think about just, you know, sports' role at the center of culture, that's where I think that conversation gets uniquely fascinating.
So the traditional launch and marketing headspace was, what is my budget? What's our billboard campaign? And let's cross our fingers that we win on the field. And those of us who know that are not actually kicking a ball and contributing to victories, you know, we don't have control over that. So what, for us, culture was, you know, what do we stand for as an organization early? And I think those of us who've been in startups, it's really tough to roll your sleeves up and commit to what your identity is on day one and then stick with it and be consistent. So for us, our purpose from day one, as I was there with those 7 of us, is to unite the world city through the world's game, and we all understand the power of football. Number 2 is to bring joy, and that's a filter for us as we make decisions. And then lastly is to be a force for good. In LA, and I'm sure in many other markets, if you ask somebody in your city what sports team or club does the most good, very rarely will you get a unanimous answer. And that I experienced that personally in LA. Nobody had a quick answer. I think the Dodgers are closest to a cultural icon in our city. And we felt like with a club, meaning a community, we felt like that would be a really important part of our identity to differentiate us in the market and to really put deep roots, is to be a force for good.
So at Santander, we believe that football, or I mean the sport, as a message booster. So sometimes, I mean, we need to link to the sport in able to amplify the messages that we want to communicate, you know? So for us, sponsorship are the ideal platform in order to communicate the brand purpose, in that case, the Santander brand's purpose. So, you know, when we say that our purpose is to help to people and business prosper, we think that in a way, football has also this capacity. At Santander, what we say is that if at any time we end the football sponsorships, our aim or our objective is going to be to have been able to deliver a legacy on our pass through football, you know. So this is why each year we try to do activations and to use the sponsorship to try to deliver this positive impact on society.
One key component of a fluid fan is that they vote with their values, right? So if you misalign with their values, whether it's, you know, all the safety measures for athletes that you're not looking at, whether it's social injustice you're not addressing, whether it's gender inequality, there's a whole list of things that, again, if you're not treating your employees well, the workforce that's building your venue, there's a misalignment, and these fluid fans, these more fickle fans, may not buy your ticket, may not watch your content, may disassociate with you. Maybe they just align with the athlete and not the property itself. But those that get it right, I think Forest Green Rovers, they're an eco-friendly
you know, they're known as the most eco-friendly football club. I'm sure you guys know about them. Fans will literally don't care about football, but they will consume that content. They will be a fan of that.
So for me, it means a lot because I had the chance to be, first of all, adopted when I was a young kid. I was born from an African mother and I was adopted from a European mother that was in Switzerland. So straight away, I had the chance to see the difference of being in Africa and then being in Europe. And I always thought that, why me? And the activism was to be active, to give back and to show something different to people in Africa, around the world, was always been with me as a young age. And that's why, as well, as soon as I got and I made money, I wanted to give back something to Africa, and I made a foundation for, not for footballers, but just for kids to get their own educations, to have the chance to go to school and to become someone in life with my agent, you know, because in Africa, or in, let's say, in country where you have less possibility, like life starts at a very young age, and you become a woman and you're only a kid, you become a man and you're only 5 or 6 years old. And we wanted really to give those kids a chance to grow up as normal and to have a normal chance in life.
Actually, the word itself, success, is not a word that I really love because sometimes it's related with material success, with, in case of football, trophy success. And for me, it has 100 different interpretations in which, from a personal point of view, go beyond the football pitch. So in my personal case, being part of CONMEBOL, being part of amazing people like Johan and Sophie, gives me really a deeper meaning of what being a football player is. I have been lucky enough to play for a number of years now as a professional football player and win trophies and live incredible experiences thanks to football. But to be able to be part of a movement which is trying to connect football and use football, the power of football, as a social tool for change, I feel that it's creating a legacy that after we stop playing football, all of the CONMEBOL members, we will feel proud that we have started a way in which people can actually help through football, and we have created a platform in which it doesn't matter what level of football do you play, it doesn't matter if you're a fan or a journalist or a psychologist like you are, you can join what we want to create, the biggest club in the world. And it gives me an incredible sense of pride, of hope, and of passion for what I do on the pitch, but especially off the pitch.
I could be able to achieve my dreams on the football pitch by being a very selfish person, but I don't want to be a selfish person. So I have defined some values for myself, and one of those 3 values that I have and I try to act on is to be a contributing person, meaning that I on the way to achieve my goals on the football pitch, I also want to help others. So that's why I'm also involved in these social projects. That's a way for me to express that value, to be a contributing person. So I think I would say that there are many ways to be purpose driven, and of course people have different purposes. But I think whether your purpose is to win titles or you want to earn a lot of money, then the most important thing is how you want to achieve those goals.
This image needs to change, that footballers or athletes are just robots and they're there to get the points or to win the league and they cannot have feelings. I think that's totally wrong, because at the end of the day, we play with our emotions. When we are on the pitch, we play with what we have in our guts and in our hearts. We give everything to try and win and to make the people that follow us happy. So we definitely have hearts and feelings.
When I see, like David said before, teammates like Marcus Rashford or Raheem Sterling or Hector Bellerin doing incredible things, not with common goal, but with incredible purposes, it gives me hope. Because I think football players, we are realizing the platform that we have, the ability that we have to reach to people and to communicate our values. So definitely being part of CONMEBOL has given me a bigger and deeper meaning of what being a football player is, beyond the trophies, beyond the wins, the defeats, and the goals.
First, I hope that as a female football player, I hope I can be a role model for girls and women and show them that football is for everybody. It's not only a sport for men, it's also for girls and women. So I hope I can, together with all other female football players, can show that it's actually something you can do. And the project I have in Ghana I'm working with, I see how much it means to the girls there to play football. I just hope that that more and more girls and women will feel like, I want to play football as well and will enjoy it. And then another thing is, I think that a lot of people look at the professional football world with some kind of contempt, that they hear about all the huge salaries, the huge transfer amounts. And I hope I can be part of pushing forward movements like Common Goal and Football for Climate and other good movements where we stand together as professional football players and try to show that the huge economy within the football world can be used to make huge changes.